Hello MTG friends, Zach here back with another Commander deck tech for you to enjoy today. Today we're going to be doing another mono blue deck, similar to Min from earlier in the week, but this is a very different deck, very different beast from Min. In fact, this is not even remotely humanoid. This is Tekuthal, as you can see over here. Oh, yeah, there we go, hand placement. Whoa, ha, there we go. Tekuthal, Superfriends. So this is a Planeswalker-themed deck, all about that proliferation effect. And so we're going to go over what Tekuthal is so you can kind of understand where this deck is coming from. So let's get this beautiful banner, boom, out of the way. Let's get talking about the deck. All right, so here is our commander. This is Tekuthal Inquiry Dominus. 2 blue for a legendary Phyrexian horror. It's a 3/5 with flying. It says if you would proliferate twice instead. And for 1 and 2 Phyrexian blue, so either 2 life or a blue mana per, remove 3 counters from among other artifacts, creatures, and planeswalkers you control to do the following. You put in a destructible counter on Tekuthal Inquiry Dominus. That's amazing. This is already a 4 mana, 3/5 flyer. The Proliferate effect is fantastic. And then just removing a couple counters off of stuff when you're already doubling your proliferates and make them indestructible, ridiculous. And then you can even proliferate that indestructible counter if you should ever be worried about people removing counters from things. Alright, so like I mentioned, this is a Planeswalkers deck, so let's start with the Planeswalkers. We're going to go into our Planeswalker stuff category here, starting with Acremoon Gauntlet, because this is one of our win cons in this game. It is a 3 mana artifact, 2 and a single blue, and it says Planeswalkers you control have 0, proliferate, and -12, take an extra turn after this one. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, choose a counter on target permanent, put an additional counter of that kind on that permanent. So that second effect is really like a singular semi-proliferate, but the fact that the 0 is just straight up proliferate synergizes incredibly with our commander, and that -12 take an extra turn after this one is just, like I said, a way to win the game. If you have a handful of planeswalkers out and one planeswalker that you can just keep stacking those counters onto, you can -12 take an extra turn, but then you've stacked up some on another one because you've been proliferating twice every single time you 0, and then that one can take an extra turn. And as long as you have enough to continue to do that, you can just take infinite turns and win the game through a couple different effects that way. We'll go through a few of those later. So let's continue through our Planeswalker stuff category with our first Planeswalker, Jace Beleren, affectionately known as Party Jace. This is 1 blue for a legendary Planeswalker, Jace, named Jace Beleren. It has 3 starting loyalty, but it +2s and has each player draw a card, -1s to have target player draw a card, or -10s to have target player put the top 20 cards of their library into the graveyard. We're probably not going to -10 in this deck, to be honest. I don't really think milling somebody, one person, not everybody, just one person for 20 is really that valuable, but that +2 is a good way to at least kind of keep people a little happy with you, because when you can repeatedly go, hey, I'm making sure everybody's drawing extra cards at the table. I'm not doing any nonsense shenanigans yet. Leave my shit alone. You can knock Jace down to below his -10 if you like, but otherwise leave my stuff alone. Next we have Jace, Architect of Thought. 2 blue for a 4 loyalty Jace. His +1 is kind of protection for your Planeswalker team here. It says until your next turn, whenever a creature an opponent controls attacks, gets -1, -0 until end of turn. The -2 lets you reveal the top 3 of your library. The opponent separates those cards into 2 piles. One goes in your hand, the other goes on the bottom of your deck. -8 for each player, search that player's library for a non-land card, exile it, that player shuffles, and then you can cast them for free. This is a really nice ultimate. You get to riffle through 3 opponents' decks and grab their best thing. Amazing. But the +1 is just really valuable here, honestly. Like, when you're dealing with attackable resources like Planeswalkers, it's really important that you have a way to keep your stuff safe, and Jace's +1 is kind of there. It does a little bit for you. Next we have Jace Cunning Castaway. 1 blue for a 3 loyalty Jace. It has a +1. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player this turn, draw a card, then discard a card. -2, make it a 2/2 illusion that gets sacrificed whenever it becomes the target of a spell. Or -5, create 2 tokens that are copies of Jace, except they're not legendary. Yeah, so Jace is a really cool way to just start getting more Planeswalkers on the board, because just proliferating 2 times with Tekuthal and Jace out means you can -5 all of your Jaces every turn and start creating exponential Jaces. That's ridiculous. Alright, we have Jace the Mind Sculptor next. It's the original Boogeyman, the classic. Not as amazing in Commander, but I mean, he's a +2. It's certainly not bad. So yeah, 2 blue, 3 mana, legendary Jace, +2. Look at the top card of target player's library. Put it on the bottom of their library if you would like. Otherwise, leave it on top. 0, you brainstorm. -1, you bounce something back to its owner's hand. -12, you exile all cards from target player's library. When that player shuffles their hand into their library. The disrespect on this card is ridiculous, and if you can keep it alive, you're going to do a lot of damage. We have Jace the Perfected Mind next. This is Jace's most recent card. 2 blue and then a Phyrexian blue for a legendary Jace with 5 starting loyalty. But it also has completed, which means you can use that Phyrexian blue in his mana cost, but if you do, he enters with 2 less loyalty. His +1 gives a target creature -3/-0. His -2 has a player mill 3 cards. Then, if a graveyard has 20 or more cards in it, you draw 3 cards. Otherwise, you draw a card. His -X mills target player 3 times X cards. Jace is pretty interesting. I think you're primarily looking at using that +1. That -2 never hurts, but we're not trying to win with mill. Jace is really just an easy way to drop a Planeswalker on board pretty early and start taking them up. Jace Wielder of Mysteries is 1 blue for a 4 mana Jace. If you would draw a card while your library has no cards in it, you win the game instead. +1 has target player mill 2, and then you draw a card. -8 has you draw 7, and then if your library has no cards in it, but you didn't draw the last card, you win the game. This deck does a lot of drawing through its Planeswalker, so this is a way to kind of ensure that you can't deck yourself out. Alright, another Planeswalker, this one not Jace, this is Karn Liberated. Another one of those Boogeyman Planeswalkers, 7 mana, 6 starting loyalty, +4. Target player exiles a card from their hand. -3. Exile target permanent, or -14, restart the game, leaving an exile all non-aura permanent cards exiled with Karn Liberated, then put those cards onto the battlefield under your control. It's an absolutely insane ult, but frankly, if you're at the point in the game where you're able to use Karn's ult, you probably shouldn't, and should continue to +4 him as a way to accrue massive amounts of loyalty and cash him in later for other effects. We have Karn the Great Creator next, 4 mana, 5 loyalty Karn. Activated abilities of artifacts your opponent's control cannot be activated. +1 turns a target non-creature artifact into an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost. Helpfully, this is up to 1, so you can just +1 them for no effect if you don't have an artifact you want to hit. Or, if your opponent has 0 mana artifacts, you can turn that thing into a 0 power and toughness artifact and destroy it. Kind of helpful. Blows up your opponent's artifact lands for 1. -2, you can choose an artifact card you own from outside of the game or in exile, reveal that card and put it into your hand. Both the modes on Karn here are absolutely phenomenal. For one, if somebody removes one of your win cons, like your Acre Moon Gauntlet, that -2 is an easy way to get it back into your hand. Additionally, Karn synergizes really well with another card we'll talk about later, Mycosynth Lattice, and kind of wins you the game by locking everybody out and just letting you kind of do whatever you want. Alright, next we have Kasmina, Enigmatic Mentor. This is 3 and a blue for a 5 loyalty Kasmina Planeswalker. She has a passive, or a static ability, spells your opponent's cast that target a creature or Planeswalker you control. Costs 2 more. -2, make a 2/2 blue wizard creature token, then draw a card and discard a card. This card is one of the uncommon walkers from the War of the Spark set, which means they only had down-tick abilities. Well, Tekuthal is effectively giving them up-tick abilities. Acre Moon Gauntlet actually gives them a semi-uptick ability. And with all the Proliferate floating around, Kasmina is going to stick around for a while and keep that very helpful 2-mana tax floating around to keep your stuff safe. Next we have Narset, Parter of Veils. 1 blue for a 5-mana Narset. Another one of those uncommon Planeswalkers from War of the Spark here. She has a static ability that says each opponent can't draw more than 1 card each turn. Then her -2 lets you look at the top 4 of your deck. You can reveal a non-creature, non-land, and put it into your hand. The rest go on the bottom in a random order. Narset finds you Planeswalkers. Narset finds you instants and sorceries with Proliferate. Narset stops your opponents from drawing lots of cards. Narset gets attacked a lot, so be ready to protect her, but she's a really phenomenal Planeswalker. Next is a non-Planeswalker in the Planeswalker stuff category. This is Rings of Brighthearth. This is a 3-mana artifact. It says when you activate an ability, if it isn't a mana ability, you can pay 2 and copy it. If you do, you can choose new targets for the copy. Planeswalker loyalty abilities are activated abilities, which means you can pay 2 mana and copy them with Rings of Brighthearth. Get those really big ultimates, get those big minuses that aren't ultimates but are still really impactful. Even impactful pluses, Rings of Brighthearth might be worth paying 2 mana into to do that. Another kind of non-Planeswalker next is Spark Double, 3 and a blue for a 0/0 illusion. But you can have Spark Double enter the battlefield as a copy of a creature or Planeswalker you control, except it enters with an additional +1/+1 counter if it's a creature, an additional loyalty counter on it if it's a Planeswalker, and it isn't legendary if that permanent is legendary. So if you need an extra Tekuthal to start proliferating like crazy, Spark Double can be that. If you need an extra copy of one of your Planeswalkers, Spark Double can be that too. And because it isn't legendary, it doesn't blow itself up. This card is insane. Absolute house. Spark Double is easily one of the most dangerous cards in this deck, just simply due to the massive amount of flexibility it offers. Alright, back to Planeswalkers. We have Tamiyo the Moon Sage. 3 blue for a Tamiyo Planeswalker with 4 starting loyalty. +1 taps a permanent, and it doesn't untap during its controller's next untap step. -2 is drawing a card for each tapped creature target player controls. -8, you get an emblem with you have no maximum hand size, and whenever a card is put into your graveyard from anywhere, you may return it to your hand. If you happen to get Tamiyo's ultimate off, your deck is going way too hard for its own good, because your opponents can almost effectively never get rid of your cards without permanent exile removal. Tamiyo is really scary, and normally you shouldn't judge a Planeswalker by their ult, but in a deck like this, the ultimates are actually something that you'll be firing off a little bit. Alright, we have another non-Planeswalker. This is a brand new card too. Teferi's Talent, 3 blue for an enchantment aura with Enchant Planeswalker. The Planeswalker has -12. You get an emblem with you may activate abilities of Planeswalkers you control in any player's turn at any time you could cast an instant. And whenever you draw a card, put a loyalty counter on the enchanted Planeswalker. This just straight up gives Commander Teferi's ultimate ability to any Planeswalker you want to give it to. This card is absolutely terrifying if you can stick it on Karn Liberated, because, whoa, he gets to 12 really fast, and then you can just stick that ability right onto the board. Very little effort, very little time. Pretty cool card, too. I like the draw a card, put a loyalty on there as well. We're testing this out. It's a little high on the mana value, but I think it's a really cool card, and so we're going to see how it performs for me. I think you should check it out, too. Maybe tell me what you think if you happen to try it. We have Teferi, Master of Time next. This is 2 blue for a Teferi with 3 starting loyalty. But you can activate the loyalty abilities of Teferi, Master of Time on any player's turn at any time you could cast an instant. +1, draw a card, then pitch a card. -3, target creature you don't control phases out. -10, take 2 extra turns after this one. So basically, you get 4 activations of Teferi every time we go around a turn cycle. On your turn, on player 2's turn, on player 3's turn, and on player 4's turn, which means you can be going up 4 loyalty just from activating abilities and rummaging through your deck a little bit. This gets even crazier with your Proliferate shenanigans, where if you happen to hit -10 on somebody else's turn, you can instant speed -10 and basically insert a turn somewhere else into the game where you normally wouldn't have, not even 1 turn, insert 2 turns of your own somewhere else into the turn order. This card is almost a win condition of his own. Teferi is ridiculous. Then we have Teferi, Temporal Archmage. This is the Commander Teferi I mentioned earlier with Teferi's Talent. 4 blue for a Teferi. It is legendary, a Teferi Planeswalker with 5 starting loyalty. This card was originally printed before Planeswalkers were considered legendary. Instead, they had a whole convoluted Planeswalker Legends rule. I wonder if he's not been reprinted since he's been considered, legendary. That's actually really interesting. Let's pull him back up. There we go. +1 lets you look at the top 2 cards of your deck. 1 goes into your hand, the other goes onto the bottom. -1 untaps up to 4. Count them, 4 target permanents. -10 gets that emblem that lets you do loyalty abilities of all Planeswalkers you control at any player's turn at any time you could cast an instant. Alright, our last Teferi is Teferi, Temporal Pilgrim. This is 3 blue for a 4 loyalty Teferi. He has a static ability that says whenever you draw a card, you put a loyalty counter on him. You can 0 him to draw a card, and thus put a loyalty counter on him. And then for -2, you can make a 2/2 blue Spirit with Vigilance, and whenever you draw a card, put a 1/1 counter on this creature. -12, target opponent chooses a permanent they control, bounces it to their hand, and then shuffles everything but their lands into their deck. Oh my god. This is a really high impact ultimate, and it's way easier to hit even without Proliferate shenanigans. Oh, this card is ridiculous. Alright, we're into our Tezzerets now. This is Tezzeret the Seeker. 3 blue, 4 starting loyalty for Tezzeret. +1 on tap up to 2 target artifacts. -X, search your library for an artifact with converted mana cost X or less. Put it onto the battlefield and then shuffle. You play Tezzeret, you -3, you get yourself an Ichor Moon Gauntlet. Insane. You -0, you go get your Mana Crypt. -1, get a Soul Ring. He's got a ton of flexibility with that -X. And -5, your artifacts become artifact creatures with base power and toughness 5/5 to end a turn. It's not the minus we're using. We're using the -X as a way to fetch out any of the important artifacts out of our decks because Tezzeret is crazy good at that. We have Tezzeret Artifice Master next, 3 blue for a 5 loyalty Tezzeret. Its +1 makes a 1/1 Thopter with flying. 0 draws a card, and if you have 3 or more artifacts, you draw 2 cards. -9 gives you an emblem that lets you search your library for a permanent card and put it onto the battlefield and shuffle at the start of each of your end steps. Great card. Just not really a lot of comments. It makes you a little blocker, draws you some cards. If you happen to go off on them, you just go fetch more Planeswalkers to go even crazier, or more protection pieces, which is probably more likely, honestly. We have Tezzeret, Betrayer of Flesh as our final Tezzeret here. This is a 4 mana, so 2 blue for a 4 loyalty Tezzeret. He has a static ability that says the first activated ability of an artifact you activate each turn costs 2 less to activate. +1, draw 2 cards, then discard 2 cards unless you discard an artifact. -2 turns an artifact into an artifact creature. If it's not a vehicle, it has base power and toughness 4/4. -6, you get an emblem with whenever an artifact you control becomes tapped, draw a card. We have the Chain Veil next, 4 generic mana for a legendary artifact. Beginning of your end step, if you didn't activate a loyalty ability of a Planeswalker this turn, you lose 2 life. Okay. 4, tap, for each Planeswalker you control, you may activate one of its loyalty abilities once this turn as though none of its loyalty abilities have been activated this turn. If you have a way to untap this and sink 4 mana into it, you can do this repeatedly to use every single Planeswalker's ability infinite times. Yeah, great card. It's already really good even just on like a once per turn kind of clause. Just don't play this when you don't have a Planeswalker out on the board. Otherwise, go ham, this thing's amazing. We have Ugin the Ineffable next, 6 mana for a 4 loyalty Ugin. Colorless spells you cast cost 2 less to cast. +1, exile the top card of your library face down, and you can look at it. Make a 2/2 colorless spirit creature token, and when that token leaves the battlefield, you put the exiled card into your hand. -3, destroy target permanent, that's 1 or more colors. Great removal, great static, really solid plus because it's both semi-card draw and making a token defender. We have the other Ugin too. We have Ugin the Spirit Dragon. This is an 8 mana Ugin with 7 starting loyalty, +2 deals 3 damage to any target. -X exiles each permanent with mana value X or less that's 1 or more colors. That is ridiculous. You got to be really careful with your -X though. You don't want to be wiping off your own Planeswalkers. But if you've got just like 2 Ugins and 2 Karns out, you can really safely do that. -10 gains you 7 life, draws you 7 cards, and lets you drop 7 permanents from your hand onto the battlefield. And our final Planeswalker is Will Kenrith. 4 blue for a 4 loyalty Will Planeswalker. +2 lets you give up to 2 target creatures base power and toughness 0/3 and have them lose all abilities until your next turn. Amazing, amazing blank effect here. This really protects your team, and shutting off abilities is really nice as well. We have a -2 that says target player draws 2 cards, and until your next turn, instance, sorceries, and Planeswalker spells that player cast cost 2 less to do so. -8, a target player gets an emblem with whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, copy it, choose new targets for the copy. He has partner with Rowan Kenrith and can be your commander, but neither of those things are applicable in this deck. Alright, so those are our Planeswalker stuffs. Let's go ahead and look at our Proliferate effects, because Tekuthal wants to proliferate, and our Planeswalkers want to be proliferated upon. The first one is Contagion Clasp. This is 2 mana artifact. When it enters, put a -1/-1 counter on target creature. For 4 mana, and tapping this, you can proliferate. Contentious Plans is a sorcery for 1 and a blue. Proliferates and draws you a card. Deep Glowskate does not proliferate, but it's 5 and a blue for a 3/3 fish. That when it enters the battlefield, you double the number of each kind of counter on any number of target permanents. Notably, if you have poison counters on players, while you can proliferate those, Deeplo's Gate does not double that number. Please bear that in mind. However, this is a crazy way to just suddenly have all of your planeswalkers at a massive burst of loyalty. Deeplo's Gate is a really, really powerful inclusion. Experimental Augury is 1 and a blue for an instant. That you look at the top 3 of your deck, put 1 into your hand, 1 on the bottom, and the other 2 on the bottom. And then you proliferate. Flux Channeler is 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human wizard that whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you proliferate. Inexorable Tide is 3 blue for an enchantment. Whenever you cast a spell, proliferate. Next is Arenicus's Vile Duplication. This is 3 and a blue, and this doesn't have the word proliferate on it. That's so odd. It says create a token that's a copy of target creature you control, except the token is flying and isn't legendary. That creature is legendary. Oh yeah, we're copying our commander. This is a way to copy your commander and now get 4 proliferates for every single proliferate that you do. Or 3. 3 proliferates for every proliferate. Basically, you get more proliferates for every Tekuthal that you have an extra copy of. Because he adds 1 more proliferate per proliferate action. We have Mesmerizing Dose, 1 blue for an aura that enchants a creature, taps the creature, and then proliferates, and then the creature does not untap. This is probably the weakest card in the deck, and it's still pretty decent because it's tap removal, and it is proliferating. We have Prologue to Pheresis. This is an instant for 1 and a blue. It gives each opponent a poison counter, and then lets you draw a card. This is just giving the deck another kind of inevitability piece that lets you eventually win the game through all of your proliferates if your planeswalkers aren't doing it for you. We have Staff of Completion next for 3 mana. It's an artifact. You can tap it and pay 1 life to destroy a permanent you own. Tap it and pay 2 life to add a mana of any color. Tap it and pay 3 life to, proliferate. Tap it and pay 4 life to draw a card, or pay 5 mana to untap your staff. This card is crazy powerful as long as you have the life to sustain it. I'm using this to proliferate as often as possible, but even that 1 life, destroy target permanent you own, can be valuable if an opponent has stolen a card of yours. We have Sword of Truth and Justice next, a 3 mana equipment. The equipped creature gets +2/+2, has protection from white and blue. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control, and then proliferate with Equip 2. Even better, Equip 2! This is part of the cycle of Sword and X, and this one is incredibly powerful for this deck. Tezzeret's Gambit is 3 in a Phyrexian blue, so either 2 life or a blue mana. For a sorcery, lets you draw 2 cards and proliferate. Finally, we have Viral Drake, 3 and a blue for a Drake with flying, infect, and pay 3 and a blue to proliferate. Alright, let's go through our protection pieces next. We have Displacer Kitten for 3 and a blue. It's a creature cat beast. It's a 2/2. It says Avoidance. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you can exile 1 target non-land permanent you control, and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control. So if somebody's going to kill one of your planeswalkers, but you've got like an instant speed proliferate effect, you can cast that to flicker the planeswalker, making it no longer an attack target. Sure, it'll reset its loyalty, but like, would you rather have your planeswalker, or would you rather have it a little less loyal? Fate Spinner next is 1 blue for a 1/2 human wizard. Beginning of each opponent's upkeep, that player chooses draw step, main phase, or combat step. The player skips each instance of the chosen step or phase this turn. Generally, Fate Spinner is going to try and force your opponent to pick combat step because they want to be able to cast their spells on their main phase. They want to be able to draw their card for the turn. Fate Spinner creates a kind of difficult decision, but not a super hard one. I think unless you are really going off with your walkers and people are worried about it, they're probably going to skip their combat step because it just makes the most sense. Hangerback Walker is an XX artifact construct. It's a 0/0, but it enters with X 1/1 counters on it. When it dies, you make a 1/1 colorless Thopter for each 1/1 counter on Hangerback Walker. And they have flying. For 1 and tapping, you can put a 1/1 counter on it. You should just proliferate this a bunch. Get like 40 1/1 counters on it, so it's already a huge threat. And then if it would ever be removed, you get a whole bunch of flying little 1/1 Thopters. All right, here's Mycosynth Lattice, 6-mana artifact. All permanents are artifacts in addition to their other types. All cards that are on the battlefield, spells, and permanents are colorless. Players may spend mana as though it were mana of any color. Except if you have Karn the Great Creator out on the board, your opponents can't activate abilities of artifacts, and everything's an artifact, so they can't use their lands to cast their spells. They can't win the game unless they have huge creatures that you just somehow can't deal with. We have Ominous Seas next, 1 and a blue for an enchantment. Whenever you draw a card, you put a Foreshadow counter on Ominous Seas. You can pull 8 foreshadow counters off the Ominous Seas and make yourself an 8/8 Kraken, or if it's in your hand, you can cycle it for 2. This card is really great in this deck. It's a great way to generate yourself some creatures, especially big creatures like a friggin' 8/8 Kraken. I have had a dozen Krakens on the board at once at certain points with this deck because of how many times this deck is able to proliferate. We have Silent Arbiter as our last one here. This is 4 mana for a 1/5 artifact construct. No more than 1 creature can attack each combat. No more than 1 creature can block each combat. What better way to stop your opponents from killing your planeswalkers than stopping them from swinging almost entirely? Silent Arbiter is amazing and is a must-remove on sight for your opponents, and a must-play on draw for you as long as you've got a board you want to protect. Alright, so we're through a large portion of this deck already. We've got our draw and tutor effects, we've got our interaction, and we've got our mana next. So I'm going to quickly burn through our mana because this one's a fast category. We have the Arcane Signet, we have Astral Cornucopia, which is XXX, enters the battlefield with X charge counters. You can tap it to choose a color, add a mana of that color for each charge counter on Astral Cornucopia. I like to play this on 3 with a single charge counter on it, and then start proliferating the absolute shit out of it to make a massive mana rock. Same dice with Everflowing Chalice. It's a 0 mana artifact with multi-kicker for 2 mana. Each time you kick it, it gets a charge counter on it, and you can tap it to add a colorless for each charge counter on Everflowing Chalice. Well, since you can proliferate the charge counters, here we go. Really powerful effect as well. We have Glistening Sphere next. This is 3 mana for an artifact that enters tapped, but when it enters, proliferate. Tap to add a mana of any color, and if an opponent is corrupted, you can tap to add 3 mana of any one color. Corrupted being if an opponent has 3 or more poison counters. We have Mana Crypt. We have Sapphire Medallion, which makes your blue spells cost 1 less. We have Soul Ring. That's our ramp for this deck. That is our normal kind of artifact ramp, with only really Overflowing Chalice, Glistening Sphere, and Astral Cornucopia seeming a little weird here. In our Draw and Tutor suite, we have Fabricate to try and find our Ichor-Moon Gauntlet, or maybe something else, but usually Ichor-Moon Gauntlet. Ledger Shredder is a semi-draw spell. This is really more card filtering, but it gets 1/1 counters on itself, and Tekuthal and thus your Proliferate interacts really nicely with that as well. We have Recall. This is a pretty old card. Its most recent printing was in, looks like 6th edition. This card hasn't been printed in a while. It costs XX and a blue. Choose and discard X cards. Return X target cards in your graveyard to your hand. Exile Recall. This card is amazing. Blue doesn't get a lot of graveyard interaction in terms of recurring stuff. Recall is a way to filter away some unused lands in your hand into the planeswalkers that you most want to see back on your board. This was a really great discovery when I was digging through Scryfall. I highly recommend you try this out in this deck. It can be an absolute game saver. We have the good old Ristic Study next, where I'm going to talk about it. We have Trophy Mage, 2 and a blue for a 2/2 human wizard. Lets you search for lets you search your library for an artifact with mana cost 3. Put it into your hand when Trophy Mage enters the battlefield. Ichor-Moon Gauntlet costs 3 mana. Alright, our interaction suite is pretty standard here. We have an Offer You Can't Refuse as a counterspell. We have Counterspell as a counterspell. We have the Cyclonic Rift as a bounce effect. We have Fierce Guardianship as a counterspell, and so same with Mana Drain. This one's a little weird. We have Pendrel Mists. This was a recent discovery of mine as well. 3 and a blue for an enchantment that gives each creature, during your upkeep, pay 1 or sacrifice this creature. This deck does not play a lot of creatures. It can generate a decent number of them, but it doesn't at its base play a whole lot of creatures. And Pendrel Mists is an incredible way of making sure that your opponents really have to consider their options on if they want to keep their creatures or not. We have Pongify, which is a single mana instant to destroy a creature and give them a 3/3 ape. Then we have the Phasing of Zhalfir. This is 2 blue, read ahead saga. So you can choose to start on chapter 1, 2, or 3. If you start on 1 or 2, another target non-land permanent phases out. And it can't phase in for as long as you control the Phasing of Zhalfir. But really the important part here is the 3, you destroy all creatures. For each creature destroyed this way, its controller creates a 2/2 black Phyrexian creature token. I would much rather give an opponent an army of 2/2s than allow them to continue to have a huge swath of creatures in the air, big dudes on the ground, or maybe even powerful activated effects. Tekuthal also gets indestructible when you use his counters his activated ability in your counters, so he survives the Phasing of Zhalfir just on his own entirely. You can even drop this in on 2 as a way to protect one of your pieces that you need to or would like to keep alive. But it's a really powerful board wipe in this deck, specifically because of what it's hitting and how easy it is to drop onto the board, and maybe even proliferate to skip it ahead a chapter or something. Because you could totally drop this in on 1, proliferate, boom, you're on 2, proliferate, boom, you're on 3. Look at that, you just wiped the board and saved something. Walking Ballista is just like the previous XX, but instead of making 1/1s when he dies, you can remove a 1/1 from him to deal 1 damage to any target. You can pay 4 mana to put a 1/1 counter on him, and he enters, of course, with X 1/1 counters on it. Alright, we are blitzing through this deck. We've looked at the Proliferate, we looked at the Protection, we looked at all of the Planeswalkers, the draw, the interaction, the mana, the commander. Let's look at the lands. We have Academy Ruins as a way to tuck our artifacts back on top of our deck. We have Buried Ruin as a way to put our artifact back into our hand. We have Castle Vantress for a little bit of scrying. We're playing a lot of islands as well. Crawling Barrens is a manland that we can proliferate on, whether it is a land or not at the time. Demolition Field is my new favorite land destruction piece because it refunds itself for both you and your opponent, but gets that real problematic land out of the way. Glasspool Mimic is here as a way to just copy anything important. The backside of this card is a tapped blue land, but the front side I think is pretty powerful as a way to copy the creatures that you really care about. Inkmoth Nexus is a way to get some poison onto an opponent. Interplanar Beacon gets you a little bit of life whenever you cast a Planeswalker. You can tap for a colorless, or paying 1 into it, get you 2 mana of different colors. Spend this mana only to cast your Planeswalkers. This is effectively blue mana in this deck. You have to choose blue and another color, but that other color is just going to pay the generic cost anyway. We are running 13 islands, a Karn's Bastion, which taps to add a colorless, or 4 proliferates. Running Maze of Ith is a way to remove something really dangerous out of combat. Murex is a way to make mites with Toxic 1, so another way to kind of sneakily apply some poison damage. You can also tap it to add a colorless, or if it's entered this turn, you can add a mana of any color. It's a sphere land as well. Mystic Sanctuary is a land island, but not basic. When it enters tapped unless you control 3 or more other islands. And when it enters untapped, you get a target instant or sorcery from your graveyard. Bam! Slap down right on top of your library. Nesting Grounds either taps for a colorless, or for 1, you can move a counter from a target permanent you control onto another target permanent at sorcery speed. So yeah, Nesting Ground makes sure that you can move those indestructible counters off of Tekuthal onto something else of value. Nykthos Shrine to Nyx taps for a colorless, or for 2 mana, choose a color, add to your mana pool an amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. Is there a more modern printing of this card? I thought it was Pro Tour promo. There we go. 2, tap, choose a color, add an amount of mana of that color equal to your devotion to that color. That is a much easier wording, my goodness. We have Otawara Soaring City. This is a legendary land that taps for a blue, or for 3 and a blue, discard Otawara, return an artifact, creature, enchantment, or planeswalker to its owner's hand. Just costs 1 less for each legendary creature you control. Usually we have lots of legendary creatures, not so many legendary planeswalkers. Lots of legendary planeswalkers, not so many legendary creatures. This can still reduce its cost pretty nicely. We have Saprazan's Scary next. This is a land that comes into play tapped, with 2 depletion counters on it. You can tap it and remove a depletion counter from the Scary to get 2 blue mana in your mana pool rather than just 1. However, if there's no depletion counters on the Scary, sacrifice it. Which is fine, because we're proliferating twice as long as Tekuthal's out. Your Scary should not run out of depletion counters unless you're a little desperate. I've had that happen before. It's okay. You're allowed to sacrifice it too. But if you can get around it, you absolutely should. We have Seagate Restoration next, which is 4 blue for a sorcery. You draw cards equal to the number of cards in your hand plus an extra one, and you no longer have a maximum hand size. Importantly, this is a land, Seagate Reborn on the back. You can bolt yourself for 3 damage to have this enter untapped, or just let it enter tapped. Always an option. Seed of the Synod, just artifact land that taps for blue. Mycosynth Gardens is a sphere land. You tap to add a colorless. You can pay 1 and tap it to add a mana of any color, or importantly, X tap. Mycosynth Gardens permanently becomes a copy of target non-token artifact you control, with mana value equal to the X that you paid into it. This copies your Ickermoon Gauntlet. You should play the Mycosynth Gardens. This card's really great. I really like the Gardens. It's a really powerful and flexible piece in any deck that's running artifacts, and this one is. Urza's Saga. There's a lot of text on this card, but Urza's Saga is a powerhouse. It is a saga and a land all at the same time, so it's an enchantment land, Urza's Saga. Very funny, Wizards. It's 1 just gives it the ability to tap for a colorless. It's 2 gives it the ability to pay 2 mana and tap this to make a 0/0 construct that gets +1/+1 for each artifact you control. And for 3, you sack your Saga after resolving this. You go get an artifact with mana value 0 or 1, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. War Room lets you tap it for a colorless or 3 and tap it, pay 1 life since our commander is only 1 color, to draw a card. My friends, that is the entirety of this Tekuthal deck. I think we went through that pretty quickly, pretty efficiently. The build of this deck with like all the fancy versions that I've got looks like it's just under $1,000, but I think with any printings it looks like you can get this down to about 500. Unfortunately, with a weird deck like this that focuses so much on Planeswalkers, I think you would really struggle to build a budget version of this that operates in quite the same way. Planeswalkers are popular, and Planeswalkers are usually not very cheap, so if you want those higher impact pieces like your Ugins, like your Chain Veils, even like a couple of these Tezzeret's, like the Seeker here, your Teferis. Most of those Teferis are actually a little pricey. You are just going to want to be able to shell those out or go proxy your deck if you need to. At least in my playgroup, we have absolutely no qualms against proxying if you do it correctly. And it's a great way to spread your cards out a little better rather than just having one deck at a time and moving cards around. So no budget for this one, but we will quickly look at a couple hands to mulligan with. See, this opening hand here has a land, and it doesn't even generate a land of color. We're going to mulligan that bad boy. Now this is a little more like it. I see 3 lands here. I see an interaction piece. I see an Ickermoon Gauntlet. I see a clone here and Counterspell. And this looks pretty keepable because we can be drawing, hey, look at that, right into a Planeswalker. So over the next few turns, we just draw the right pieces to get Tekuthal out, get our stuff out, and just start going off. Let's do another hand here. Let's maybe do 1 or 2 more hands. I see 3 lands here. I see an Everflowing Chalice that we can drop on turn 2, and a Ominous Seas that we can drop on 2 if we need to as well. This looks very keepable. Turn 1 draw is another land, which just makes this hand even better. Let's go ahead and look at 1 more hand. Maybe we'll get one that's a little iffy here. Okay, so we have Interplanar Beacon, and we have Urza Saga, but we have the Contagion Clasp. We have a Jace that we can drop on 3. We have a Narset that we can drop on 3, and we even have a Trophy Mage on 3 that can go get our Ickermoon Gauntlet. So let's think about this. So I think with Urza Saga here, we want to play the second, so we should probably start with our Interplanar Beacon, but we have to draw for the turn. So we Beacon, we pass, we draw, we Saga, and then I think we just play and kick this, right? That makes the most sense. And then we pass. We untap, yep, keep, we draw. We have not drawn a land here, but this does at least have the ability to tap and make a construct if we wanted it to, and we have the mana to do that. However, I think our absolute best move here right now, let's go ahead and get our counters on there, is just cast our Contentious Plans. So I think what we're going to go ahead and do here is tap both of these, cast our Contentious Plans. That lets us proliferate, like that. Look at that, that's 2 in there. And then we proliferate the Saga as well, sack it, and we go search, let's see, for one of our 1 or 0 mana artifacts, which is probably just going to be Soul Ring, I think. I know I've passed it, it's just a little further back there. I want to confirm that there's not anything else with 1 that would be the most valuable to get. I didn't think so. We go get a Soul Ring. There we go. Come on out, Soul Ring. Contentious Plans goes to the graveyard, and now we could even run out our Contagion Clasp or our Chain Veil. Now, we don't have any Planeswalkers out, so I don't think we quite want to play our Chain Veil yet. And we do need to draw our card for the Contentious Plans, right? We didn't just draw Jace. Okay, there we go. Let's drop our Contagion Clasp out, and we'll pass the turn for right now. So we only have 1 land, but we have access to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 mana. There's another land. Not quite the one that we want, though, because Tekuthal actually costs us 2 blue. Now, what we can do here, though, is drop our Jace the Perfected Mind onto the board. And I think that's a really good plan here. Let's go ahead and go 1, 2, 3. And we'll go ahead and pay 2 life there. And this comes in with 3 loyalty, not 5. We can go ahead and probably just +1 him. That makes a lot of sense to me. Boom, give something -3, -0. Now, we still have access to 1, 2, 3 mana over here. None of this is colored mana, though, so I think we just go ahead and pass it there. See what we can do next turn. There's our second blue source. There is our island. So we gained a life last turn. 1, 2, 3, 4. Bada bing, bada Tekuthal. Look at that. So now all of our proliferates are going to start being important. So we have a proliferate right here. However, we don't quite have the mana to activate it. We are 1 short, which is oh so painful. So we're going to go ahead and just uptick our Jace here. We have 1, 2, 3 mana. Look at that. We don't have the blue to cast Trophy Mage. We don't quite have that to cast that. So I think we go ahead and pass the turn again. We're getting close, though. Getting close. Okay, that is not quite what we want to see, because that's not a land. But we could totally drop our Tezzeret Artifice Master if we wanted. We could drop our Cunning Castaway if we want. We could even drop our Architect of Thought here. I think that our best move here is probably to drop our Cunning Castaway. So we're going to go ahead and pay blue, blue, and 1, keeping 4 up. We're going to play our Jace Cunning Castaway, entering at 3. We're going to go ahead and uptick him to 4. Now, we are going to swing in an opponent with our Tekuthal, which means that we get to draw a card. Look at that. Not a land, but that's okay. Now, we have 4 mana sitting over here, so why don't we go ahead on an opponent's end step. We'll proliferate twice, which means each of our planeswalkers are going up a little bit. We also gained a life last turn. This goes up by 2 as well. So our mana is suddenly looking really nasty. There is another land. We'll flip our Seagate Reborn on the back side. And we'll pay the 3 life. Whoa, pay the 3 life into that. That seems totally reasonable. And then we are, let's see, I think we should probably -5 our Jace here. Because now we get 2 token copies of Jace, entering with their 3 loyalty. Where is loyalty? Card actions. Loyalty. Add counters. Where are you, loyalty? There you are. 1, 2, 3. Add counters. Loyalty. 1, 2, 3. Alright. So we suddenly just very rapidly have several Jaces sitting around. These 2 haven't even activated this turn. This one hasn't activated this turn. We have all of this mana available to us. So let's drop 1 more Planeswalker then. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Drop Tezzeret Artifice Master coming in at 5. Let's just go ahead and 0 him, because that's going to draw us 2 cards. See if we get what we need. There's an island. That's pretty good. We're getting a life back from casting Tez as well. Now, we only have 1 mana to play around with right now, so I'm not going to... Actually, no, that's not quite true. We have this. We tap and float 4. We play an Arcane Signet. We tap that, and we activate Contagion Clasp. Do it twice. Now, here's the really fun part. Each of these are at 5. We could absolutely downtick both of them to make 4 more Jaces if we wanted, and I think that's absolutely what we should do. So these are going to die, and we're just going to keep these 2 around. We're going to put them to 3. Then we would have 2 more Jaces. That's ridiculous. Look at that. 2 more clone Jaces. They're fresh as well. We'll go ahead and give them... use their +1s up to 4. All of them, in fact, will do that up to 4. So we've just activated that 4 times. Oh boy. No, come on. There we go. Up to 4. Up to 4. And then we just swing them with Tekuthal and draw 4 cards. That's pretty good, right? Look at that. Crazy. Our hand has 10 cards, so we're going to need to pitch some stuff. We're going to pitch that island. I think we're going to pitch probably the Nar set, and then probably also pitch... Goodness, probably, honestly, probably the Recall. So that sets us up for an absolutely explosive next turn where we just get our Chain Veil and probably win the game. Or not Chain Veil, sorry. We get our Ichor-Moon Gauntlet. So let's look at that turn just to see what this looks like here. Yeah, we play an island for turn. We pay, let's do 3 mana. Cast our Trophy Mage. Go search our library for Ichor-Moon Gauntlet. Put it into our hand. Close the deck and shuffle it. Whoa, I said shuffle it, thank you. There we go. Then we just go 1, 2, 3, Ichor-Moon Gauntlet. And then we proliferate 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 12 times. minus Jace, take an extra turn. Next turn, proliferate a bunch, minus Jace. Keep doing that. Just keep doing that. We win the game. That is Tekuthal. I hope you enjoyed this deck tech. Hope you liked not just the mulligan guide, but also just looking at what a quick goldfish of this deck could look like. And I hope you come back for more. If you enjoyed this video, give us a like. Subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, or more content not quite like this, because we make a variety over here. And leave us a comment if you have some thoughts on the deck, some cards you think might work really well in the deck, some cards you think don't work so well in the deck. And ring the bell if you'd like notifications whenever I post a new video. Thank you again very much for watching. I've been Zach. This is MTG Friends.